Hi, I'm Tim and thanks for watching this video. Grandstream have just sent me yet another box and it's here in this big box and it's their Grandstream GWN7802P Pro, which is one of their PoE Pro range of network switches. So what we'll do is take a look inside the box, go through the specs, do a quick comparison and then get it in my network rack and powered on. So let's get started. So here we are, and as you can see the box won't even fit on camera because it's so big. So just wanted to let you know before I take everything out of the box that the packaging is slightly different with this one. Now there's a cardboard insert as you can see here on the top. There's a little recess there with the guide, so you get the usual quick start guide, declaration of conformance in there. And then there's a little compartment here which has the power lead, the rubber feet and so on in there. So what I'll do is get everything out of the box, get it all set up on the desk so we can see it without all the cardboard packaging. So I'll do that now and I'll be right back shortly. So here we are with everything out of the box and we get the usual screws for the rack mount ears. We get some rubber feet which you can use to mount it on a desk or table or shelf if you want to do so. We get the power lead, so it has an internal power supply and it's the usual 3-pin plug on the end which goes into the back of the switch. So there's no external power supply with this, which is good to see. We get the two rack mount ears for rack mounting it, and those are the standard short rack mount ears. We get the connector which goes at the back to hold the power cable in place and stop it being accidentally pulled out. We get the grounding cable there. We get the usual sticky label with the barcode and factory reset password on there. We get the quick installation guide as usual and a certificate of regulatory information. And then of course we get the switch itself, which is a full length switch as you can see here. So it's a full size one. One thing different is you'll see at the left hand side here there's a QR code. Now this is a new feature which I've noticed and it's used to adopt the switch into their cloud system, so GDMS.cloud. So all you do is scan the QR code here with a mobile phone and then you can adopt it into the GDMS cloud system. So we get the label there at the bottom, GWN7802P Pro, which is the model number, and Grandstream underneath. At the right hand side we get the switch ports themselves. So on this there's the console port, there's the factory reset button there which you use to reset with a pin, system LED. We get two SFP plus ports, these are 10 gigabit so they're SFP plus. So there are rubber covers on those. And then we get the ports. So on this, as it's the 7802P Pro, this is a PoE switch and it has 16 ports. Now ports 1, 2, 3 and 4, these are PoE++ ports. So they can provide up to 60 watts of power on those 4 ports there. And then the rest of them are just PoE+, so they can provide 30 watts of power per PoE port for those remaining ports. Now these are all 1 gigabit ports. Now to be honest, what I would have liked to have seen is them all being 2.5 gigabit with it being a Pro model range. Unfortunately they're not, they're all 1 gigabit, but that's what it is. So Grandstream must have had a reason for doing that, probably for cost point of view or something. But anyway, I can still certainly make use of this switch and I like the switch so far. Although I haven't tried it yet, I will be doing, and I'll be installing it in the rack in this video as I've mentioned. I'm going to get it powered on, and then once it's powered on, off camera I will be adding some devices and setting up VLANs. Now it's a pretty standard web interface compared with the others, but we will take a look at the web interface just to make sure that it's still familiar to you if you're used to the other Grandstream switches. So we'll take a look at that in this video as well. So there is basic switch. So we've got the console port, as I've said, 2 SFP plus ports, 10 gigabit, and then 16 1 gigabit ports, with the first 4 being PoE++, so up to 60 watts of power for those first 4 ports there. At the left hand side, we've got a grill, which is used to air intake, so the air goes into that switch at that end. And then on the right side, we have 2 cooling fans here. So the air gets pulled in from the left side, sucked into the fans, and the hot air blown out through the fans here at the right side. Then at the back, we have the grounding lug. So there you would use the grounding cable here, connect it to that grounding lug, and then you can earth it if you have an earthing point in your network rack or some other type of earthing point available. Then we get the 3-pin power connector. Now there's no RPS connection on this, so there's no redundant power on this model. However, with the higher model numbers in the Pro range, there are RPS connections on the back of the switch for redundant power. And there we have the GWN7802P Pro, their new Pro range of switches. So what we'll do now is go through some specifications to compare them with previous 16-port switch models. So we'll get onto that right now. So here we are with the comparison and the specifications. So as a comparison, we've got the GWN7802P, the GWN7812P, and the GWN7802P Pro, which we're just taking a look at now. So we've got for the layer type, now the first one is layer 2 plus. We've got layer 3 for the GWN7812P, and then layer 2 plus plus for this switch. So for the CPU, I wasn't able to ascertain what switch models they were for the first 2 comparison switches, but this current one has a single core MIPS interactive 1 GHz. For the RAM, it has 256, whereas the other 2 models have versus 128 and 256 megabytes. So this RAM is the same as the GWN7812P. Now, just to clarify, these are all 16-port switches. So I've tried to do sort of a best comparison as I can. For the NAND flash, it's 32 megabytes with the 7802P. 128 with the 7812P, and for this one didn't actually state this in the specification, so I'm not sure what the NAND flash will be. For the NOR flash, it's 32 megabytes, which is a lot higher than the other 2, and for the 7802P it didn't actually mention in the specifications. So for jumbo frames, it's 12288 as it is with the 7812P, and versus the 7802P, it's 10240. For the PoE standards, as I mentioned and showed you, there are both PoE, PoE Plus and PoE++ ports on this switch. Now the first 4 ports, as I've mentioned, are PoE++, but the remaining ones are PoE+. So as you can see, it's got the increase in PoE ratings compared with the other 2 switches here. The 10 gig SFP Plus ports, now there's only 2 on this, whereas the 7812P, there's 4 on that. However, the 7802P didn't have any 10 gig SFP Plus ports. It only has 4 1 gigabit SFP ports. So they've all got 16 gigabit Ethernet ports, all got 16 PoE ports, and for the external RPS support, the 7802P, this current one doesn't have RPS support, so the one we're reviewing now. However, the 7812P does have RPS support. So the maximum PoE power per port is 60 watts, with it being a PoE++ model. That's for the first 4 ports are 60 watt. So the remaining out of the 16 are 30 watt, as are the other 2 models here. The maximum PoE power is 240 watts for both of the other 2 switches, and for this one it's 250 watts. The non-blocking throughput is 36 gigabits per second. Now the other 2 are 20 gigabits and 56 gigabits per second respectively. The switching capability is 72 gigabits per second, whereas the 7812 is 112 gigabits and the 7802 is 40 gigabits per second. The forwarding rate is 53.568 million packets per second, whereas the 7812P is 83.3 and the 7802 is 29.7. The packet buffer is 8.4 megabytes, whereas the 7812 is 12 and the 7802 is 4.1. There's no stacking capability on this switch. However, with the 7812P, you can stack up to 4 devices. With the 7802P, there's no stacking as with this current one. Total VLANs for all 3 switches is 4000 and the number of fans in all 3 switches is 2. The typical fan noise level is 31.05 decibels for the 7802 and 33.85 for the 7812P. So very similar with those two. However, I was unable to ascertain the fan noise level for this current GWN7802P Pro Switch. So that's the specifications in simple terms. So what we'll do next is I'll get it installed in my rack, powered on, and then we'll take a look at the web interface. So we'll get onto that now. So here we are, and you can see that I've installed the switch just above the patch cable there, which is then above the GWN7822P. So what I've done is linked it with a fibre connection. So daisy chained it to the GWN7822P via the patch cable there, and that's the fibre patch cable. The plan is to get a aggregation switch so that both switches and the router are linked into the aggregation switch. So what we'll do now is take a look at the web interface. So here we are, and I've logged into the switch. So what I've done is typed in the IP address, which I obtained from my GCC 6020, and we've been taken in to the usual standard dashboard, which gives the basic information, resource status, device temperature, which is currently running at about 39 degrees Celsius. We get the system events and the fans. So at the moment, the fans are not spinning. That's probably because no devices are connected. So the switch is very quiet. Now, the fans did ramp up when I first booted up the switch, which you would expect them to do. But once the switch is powered on, settled down, the fans are basically, you can't hear them at all, which is good to see and good to hear, of course. So at the left-hand side, we get the system information, which we're in at the moment. Then we get the port information. So it gives you the details of the ports. So it shows the 2.5 gigabit connection. However, these are not applicable to these because they're all 1 gigabit ports. So 1 through to 16 ports are all 1 gigabit. However, ports 17 and 18, this one is the uplink port to the GWN7822P switch. So it's daisy chained into that switch using port number 18. And you'll see we're getting a 10 gigabit connection here. So if we click on the port, it will give you more information. So it gives you the neighbouring information. So the host name is GWN7822P. So that's why it's showing there, because of the uplink, and it showed the IP address of the uplink switch as well, and the data being transmitted. We also get the basic information, so it gives you the port, so the speed is set to auto detect, and that's 10 gigabits per second. We get information about the fibre, so the fibre module is running at 38.32 degrees Celsius. We get these statistics, and so this is pretty standard, so that it's nice to see that they've standardised the layout in these Pro switches, and which is the same as their other switches, apart from obviously the new features, and which have been added, so they will be showing up in the menu options here as well. So we get the port basic settings, port groups in that option. Next one is port statistics. Then the next one down is loopback detection, port auto discovery, port auto recovery, link aggregation, MAC address table, VLANs, and so on. So if you want to create your VLANs, you'd go into this tab here, or if you're using GDMS or the GCC device as the controller, then you program those into the GCC so that it will then push through the settings into this switch automatically. We get spanning tree, IP, so we've got VLAN IP interface there, DHCP server, relay, ARP table, neighbor discovery, DNS, multicast, routing or routing, PoE, so we can click on global, and then it gives you the chip information for the PoE chip. So the PoE power supply will support 802.3 AF, AT and BT. So chip PoE1 is on, so all the chips are showing us on, and they're showing us the supply voltage being 54 volts. Then we go down to interface, so here it will give you all the port details of which ports are being powered via PoE. Then we get QoS, so we get the usual QoS information in there, options and various things. So we get Q shaping in there, which I don't think I've seen in the previous switch that I have. So the GWN7802P, I haven't seen Q shaping in there. So we get Q scheduling as well, priority mapping, rate limit. So then with security, we get all the usual options in there. Anti-attack, which I think is quite new as well. DAI, TAC, ACS Plus, AAA, identity authentication, DHCP snooping, DHCP v6 snooping. Then we get maintenance, so we've got the usual upgrade, diagnostics, backup and restore, SNMP, Arbon, LLDP, LLDP med, energy efficient Ethernet, and the alerts. Then we get system, so we get time policy, user management, access control, and basic settings. So that is an overview of the GWN7802P Pro, which is one of the new Pro range of switches that Grandstream have recently released. Now, if you want to head over to Quick Tech Solutions and check out Tony's channel there, he will be reviewing in the next few days the GWN7806P Pro. So if you want to know about the 7806P Pro switch, why not head over to his channel and take a look at his videos. Now, my thoughts, I like this switch. Now, as I said earlier, I would like to have seen all 2.5 gigabit ports on the switch rather than 1 gigabit. With this being a Pro model, I think they could have done that on all 16 ports on this switch. So that's my only sort of downside thought to this, with it being the Pro range. So that will do it for this video, but as I've said, I like this switch. So thanks for watching, and I'll be back again soon with more videos. Take care. Bye for now.